When my son told me that I would not be welcome at his house for Christmas, I smiled, got in my car, and made one call. By the new year, I had their mortgage payments canceled. And that was just the beginning of my plan. Justice must be restored, and arrogance punished. You won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. My name is Evelyn Carter. For most of my life, I believed that if you gave everything, your love, your time, your money, your family would always be there for you. I was a mother who sacrificed every dream I had, every spare dollar I earned, just to make sure my only son, Daniel, had the life I never did. But I was wrong. The breaking point came last December, just days before Christmas. Daniel called me on the phone, his voice tight and rehearsed. "Mom, we've decided it's best if you don't come for Christmas dinner this year. Rebecca's parents feel it might be uncomfortable." Uncomfortable. That word cut through me like ice. After 5 years of paying their mortgage, covering their bills, and giving them nearly $3,000 every month, I was suddenly uncomfortable. Not a mother, not family, just an inconvenience. I sat there in my small kitchen, staring at the cheap Christmas decorations I'd bought at the dollar store, wondering how I had become invisible in the very life I helped build. My late husband, Anthony, had been gone for 8 years, and in that silence I had poured everything into Daniel. He was all I had left, and yet somehow I wasn't enough. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every moment, the school uniforms I'd stitched late at night, the extra shifts I worked so he could go on class trips, the way I clapped the loudest at every school play and soccer game. I thought love and sacrifice would earn me a place at his table forever. Instead, it had earned me a seat outside, looking in through frosted glass. But that rejection lit a spark in me, a spark I didn't know still existed. If Daniel and his in-laws thought they could erase me from his life like I was some charity case, they were wrong. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. And for the first time in years, I felt something stirring in me that wasn't grief or guilt. I felt strength. A week later, on a cold January afternoon, I heard the crunch of tires on my driveway. Through the lace curtain, I saw Daniel's car. My heart skipped. I hadn't seen him since that awful phone call. He walked in without knocking, his shoulders hunched, his face pale. Behind him was Rebecca, standing stiff, her designer coat wrapped tight around her as though my modest little home carried a chill she couldn't stand. "Mom," Daniel began, not meeting my eyes. We need to talk." I braced myself. Rebecca stepped forward before he could continue. "Evelyn, it's not working anymore. You paying for the house, the bills, it's not fair to Daniel. He's a grown man. He needs to stand on his own." I stared at her in disbelief. Not fair to Daniel? For 5 years, I had been covering everything so he could live in that grand suburban house, one they never could have afforded without me. And now suddenly I was the burden? My voice shook at first, but then it steadied. Not fair to Daniel? What about what's fair to me? I've given you both more than I could ever afford. I've skipped dinners, patched up old shoes, lived in this tiny place so you could play house in luxury. And you tell me I'm not welcome at Christmas because it makes your parents uncomfortable? Daniel winced, finally looking at me. His eyes were rimmed red, guilt swimming in them. But he stayed silent. Always silent when Rebecca or her parents pulled the strings. "Do you know what hurt the most?" I whispered. "It wasn't missing Christmas. It was realizing my son doesn't see me as his mother anymore, just as a bank account." Rebecca folded her arms, unmoved. "We just thought it was time to set boundaries." I felt something break inside me then, but it wasn't weakness. It was the last thread of fear. I stood tall, my hands no longer trembling. You're right. It is time for boundaries, which is why starting now, my support ends. No more mortgage payments, no more bills. You wanted independence? You've got it. Daniel's face drained of color. Mom, please, we'll lose the house. I cut him off. Then lose it! You're a grown man, Daniel. Figure it out. Sell it, downsize, get a job that pays enough. But don't you dare come here expecting me to fix the mess for you anymore. For the first time in years, the room fell silent in a way that favored me. Rebecca's confidence faltered. Daniel swallowed hard, finally seeing me not as a desperate mother clinging to relevance, but as a woman reclaiming her dignity. I walked to the door, opened it wide, and stood aside. Goodbye, Daniel. They left without another word, and as the door shut behind them, I realized my house had never felt warmer. That night, after Daniel and Rebecca drove away, I sat alone in my living room. The silence pressed in, heavier than it had ever felt. For 5 years, my life had revolved around helping them. Every paycheck, every sacrifice, every skipped holiday, it had all gone into that house of theirs. And now, with one cold sentence, I had been dismissed, like an unwanted guest. I poured myself a cup of tea and stared at the framed photo on my mantel. It was of my late husband, Samuel, smiling in his worn flannel shirt. He'd been gone almost 8 years, and in that time, I'd poured all my energy into Daniel. Maybe too much. Did I raise him wrong? I whispered into the empty room. Did I make it too easy? But then my eyes shifted to another photo, one taken last Easter. Me standing with my neighbor Lucia and her family, their arms around me as though I belonged. They had invited me without hesitation, without conditions. No one had looked down on my old shoes, or my plain dress, or the way I spoke. They had just welcomed me. Tears filled my eyes, but they weren't just of grief. They were of clarity. It struck me then. Family isn't the people who share your blood. Family is the people who share their table, their laughter, their lives. The next morning, Lucia knocked on my door with a plate of warm conchas. She took one look at my tired face and said, Evelyn, come by Sunday. The kids are putting on a little show for school. They'd love for you to see it. I smiled, the ache in my chest softening. I'd love that. For the first time in years, I looked forward to Sunday dinner. Not because I had to buy my way in, but because I was wanted there. That realization was the beginning of something new. I started making small changes. I went through my old finances and, for the first time, set money aside just for me. I signed up for a ceramics class at the community center. I began walking each morning, breathing in the cold winter air, feeling stronger with each step. The pain of Daniel's rejection was still there, but it no longer defined me. It became a scar, not an open wound. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this was just the beginning of reclaiming my life. Christmas came, and with it the dreaded invitation, or perhaps the demand, to attend dinner at Rebecca's parents' house. Cody and Catherine had always looked down on me, whispering behind my back, treating me as though I were nothing more than an inconvenience. This time, though, I came prepared. I arrived with my briefcase, not filled with gifts, but with truth. For years, I had carried receipts, bank statements, proof of every dollar I had funneled into Daniel and Rebecca's lives. That night, I wasn't just going to sit quietly at the edge of the table. I was going to take my place, and I was going to speak. The dining room glittered with holiday lights, silver cutlery gleaming under the chandelier. Around the table sat 12 guests, extended family, neighbors, friends of Cody and Catherine. They loved their audience. Catherine greeted me with her usual stiff smile. "Evelyn, I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied calmly, setting my briefcase by my chair. Dinner began politely enough, but beneath the laughter and wine glasses clinking, tension buzzed like static. Finally, Cody raised his glass and said loudly, "We are so proud of Daniel and Rebecca, the sacrifices they've made to build this beautiful home and life." That was my cue. I stood, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Sacrifices?" I said, my voice steady but firm. "The only sacrifices here are the ones I made. For them." The table went silent. I opened the briefcase and began laying out documents one by one. For 5 years, I have been paying their mortgage. Nearly $3,000 every month. Groceries, bills, vacations. Do you know how much money that adds up to? I looked around the table, my eyes locking with each shocked face. Over $200,000. Gasps rippled through the room. "And how did they repay me?" I continued. "By turning my son against me. By whispering that I was a burden. By banning me from family gatherings. By spreading lies about me. Even planting stories in the newspaper." Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his face pale. For the first time, I saw shame in his eyes. An elderly woman in pearls leaned forward, staring at the papers. "This is unconscionable. Evelyn has supported you all this time, and you repay her by humiliating her?" Cody's carefully crafted mask cracked. "You don't understand the full situation." "I understand perfectly," the woman interrupted sharply. "You used her money while treating her like hired help. And when she finally stopped, you tried to destroy her." Catherine's voice wavered, desperate. "She abandoned us at the airport." "No," I said calmly, cutting her off. "I stopped being your free chauffeur after you told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas. After you decided my presence was inappropriate for your parents. After I spent years paying your bills while you mocked me for my background, for my education, for not being enough in your eyes." The silence was heavy. Around the table, disgust replaced sympathy. The weeks after Christmas were strangely quiet. I stopped checking my phone for messages because there weren't any worth hearing. Rebecca had left me a few voicemails in the beginning, shrill and filled with accusations, but I blocked her number after the third one. Cody and Catherine tried to call too, always with that polished tone, the one that sounded like they were speaking to a business associate rather than family. I blocked them as well. And Daniel? My son. He stayed silent. For 97 days, not a word. I counted them, because a mother always counts when her child is missing from her life, even if he's alive and well just across town. Then, one Tuesday morning in March, the silence broke. Not with a call, but with a letter. It arrived by certified mail, stamped with urgency, its envelope heavy with consequences. Notice of default. Those were the words on the front. Inside, it explained in cold legal language that Daniel and Rebecca had missed 3 months of mortgage payments. They were now over $8,400 behind, with just 14 days to make it right, or foreclosure proceedings would begin. I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee, reading the letter the way you might read about a storm in another state. Serious, yes, but not my storm. Not anymore. I had spent 5 years drowning in their storm, keeping them afloat while I went without. Now the tide had turned, and I was on dry land, watching them thrash in the waters they'd created. The calls began again after that. First Rebecca, with desperate voicemails. Then Cody and Catherine, their polished voices cracking under the weight of social humiliation. Their neighbors had seen me at Christmas dinner. Their charity friends had whispered about the truth. The image they had worked so hard to craft was unraveling thread by thread. And finally, Daniel. His number appeared on my phone again and again, but I let it ring. Part of me wanted to answer. He was still my son, after all. But another part of me needed to know how long it would take for him to show up, face to face, with no phone between us. The answer came one Thursday evening. I was sitting in my recliner, enjoying a book I'd bought with my very first mortgage-free paycheck, when there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Daniel standing there, but he wasn't the man I remembered. He looked older, worn down. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his eyes hollow with exhaustion, his shoulders carrying a weight he didn't know how to put down. Even the air around him smelled of desperation, like cheap cologne covering up something rotten underneath. "Mom," he said softly, almost like a child again. "We need to talk." I stepped aside and let him in. He glanced around my house, his eyes lingering on the new furniture, the fresh paint, the small improvements I'd finally been able to afford after years of sacrifice. It was as if he was seeing me, my life, for the very first time. "Nice place," he said quietly. "It's what happens when you spend money on yourself instead of people who don't appreciate it," I replied, settling back into my chair. "Coffee?" He shook his head. He sat on the edge of the couch, stiff and uncomfortable, like he didn't quite belong there. And maybe for the first time he realized he didn't. "Mom," he began, his voice trembling, "I need you to know how sorry I am. About everything. Christmas dinner, the newspaper article, the way we treated you." I folded my hands and waited. There was more, there always was. "I didn't know about Cody planting that story," he continued quickly. "I swear I didn't. When I found out, God, Mom, the things they said about you behind your back, about our family, about Dad's memory." My jaw tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "And what exactly did they say about your father?" He lowered his eyes, ashamed. "That he knew his place better than you knew yours. That he understood boundaries." For a moment, the air between us was heavy, filled with years of betrayal and silence. Then I said the only truth left to say. "Yes, Daniel. You should have defended me." He nodded miserably, unable to look at me, and in that silence I realized something. This wasn't about the house. It wasn't even about the money. This was about a man who had finally seen the cost of his choices and was now standing on the wreckage, asking his mother to save him. Daniel sat there on the couch, his hands trembling as he rubbed them together, like a boy caught in a lie. For years he had looked so sure of himself, confident, almost arrogant, standing beside Rebecca and her polished family, treating me like I was less than. But that night, in my living room, he was stripped of all that pride. What sat before me wasn't a man in control. It was my son, lost and broken. "The house is in foreclosure, Mom," he said finally, his voice barely more than a whisper. "I know," I replied, calm, steady, the way you sound when a storm no longer scares you. "We can't make the payments without—" He stopped, realizing what he was about to say. "Without my help," I finished for him. He swallowed hard, shame tightening his jaw. "Do you know," I said, leaning forward, "how much money I sent you over those 5 years?" He nodded faintly. "Rebecca, she added it up after Christmas. The mortgage payments, the down payment, the furniture, Everything. Over 200,000. 237,000, I corrected softly. Then I looked him straight in the eye. But you know what? I finally did the math myself. It wasn't 200. It wasn't 237. Daniel, over those years, I spent $468,000 keeping you afloat. His face crumpled like paper. He covered his eyes with his hands. Mom, oh God, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix this. You can't fix it, I said firmly, though my heart ached. That money is gone. But more importantly, those years are gone. 5 years when I could have been living my own life, making memories with people who truly valued me, instead of funding your wife's fantasy of status. He lifted his head then, tears streaking his face. But maybe we could start over. Maybe there's still a way to rebuild. I tilted my head. Are you asking me to take on your mortgage again? The hope drained from his eyes. He tried to form words, but all that came out was a broken whisper. We're going to lose everything, Mom. The house, Rebecca's respect, her parents' approval. I don't know what I'll do. You'll figure it out, I said gently, but without compromise. The same way I figured out how to live without a son who respected me. The same way I learned to spend Christmas alone, while you sat at that table pretending I didn't exist. The dam finally broke. Daniel's shoulders shook, his sobs quiet but raw, the sound of a man who'd run out of excuses. I lost you, didn't I? He whispered through the tears. I chose them over you. And now I've lost you forever. I let his words hang in the air. For years I had been invisible to him, taken for granted, treated like an inconvenience. And now, here he was, realizing the cost of those choices. You didn't lose me, I said after a long pause. You gave me away. There's a difference. He looked up, broken, searching my face for some shred of hope. Is there any chance you could forgive me? I forgave you months ago, I said, my voice steady, my heart finally free. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back. It doesn't mean pretending this didn't happen. And it doesn't mean I'll ever again pay for a life that required me to beg for scraps of your attention. He nodded slowly, tears still wet on his cheeks. And for the first time, I think he finally understood. Daniel stood to leave, his shoulders slumped, but his voice steadier than when he'd arrived. At the door, he turned back. Mom. Yes? For what it's worth, seeing you stand up for yourself at Christmas dinner, I was proud of you. Embarrassed and angry that night, yes, but proud too. I let a small smile tug at my lips. Good. Maybe there's hope for you yet. And with that, he left. That night, I poured myself a glass of the good whiskey, the kind I'd never dared open when every dollar was spoken for by someone else's needs. I stepped out onto the back porch, the cool spring air wrapping around me, fresh with the scent of budding trees and wet earth. Spokane was waking up again, the long winter giving way to something brighter, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was waking up too. I thought about the years I'd given away, 5 long years of sacrifice, humiliation, and silence, all for people who thought I wasn't good enough for their table. But those years were behind me now. I wasn't planning to waste a single day more. In 4 months, I would turn 63. Maria had been gone for 8 years. I'd spent nearly 5 of those years living as a doormat, but not anymore. The woman I saw in the reflection of my window wasn't broken or forgotten. She was strong. She was free. My phone buzzed with a message. It was from Rosa. Dinner Sunday? The kids want to show you their school projects. I smiled, my chest warming in a way no amount of whiskey could match. Wouldn't miss it, I typed back. Real family, I'd learned, wasn't about bloodlines or last names. It wasn't about approval from people who only valued appearances. Real family was about being wanted, being respected, being loved without conditions. And that's exactly what Rosa and her children had given me. I raised my glass to the night sky, the city lights twinkling like promises. The whiskey tasted like freedom. And the future? The future looked exactly as bright as I was willing to make it. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.